We'll go ahead and call the hearing to order, and I want to welcome everybody and all of our witnesses here today. Today we're going to discuss how the Washington Metro system is going to address its safety and reliability issues. And the issue is important to all the members here because when we have constituents come in, we want to make sure that when they come here to see the nation's capital, that they should be able to move around the region safely and very efficiently. The federal government has invested billions in Metro, and yet the system isn't safe and it's not reliable. Metro has been plagued by long-standing, well-documented safety issues. And unfortunately, investigations from the 1980s, from the 1990s, and today have a common refrain, and that's a lack of communication and safety procedures, which have put riders and workers at risk. The focus of today is how the system is going to change. And I'm heartened to hear that the Metro's new general manager, Paul Wiedefeld, is going to talk about his commitment to improving safety and addressing the maintenance backlog. The committee is going to be watching to ensure that the talk turns into action. The Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA, is playing an important role at Metro's temporary direct safety oversight entity. The FTA is here today to share with us what it's going to do to promote safety and reliability at the Metro. Congress can't legislate communication, and it can't buy WMATA a safety culture. WMATA has to take action on the responsibility of providing safe transit in our nation's capital. And it has to be held accountable to the federal, state, and local taxpayers that are funding them. I look forward to a very frank discussion. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Congresswoman Comstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to offer extended opening statement for the record. But first of all, last Friday, when the Metro's general manager, Paul Wiedefeld, is with us today, terminated 20 managers, 7 of whom were considered senior. I think we all hope that this is just the beginning of a new era of accountability and transparency at Metro, and I know our Washington delegation all voiced support for you in this action, as well as a number of your recent actions. We need to find new ways to run this rail. I joined Congressman Delaney on changing the board structure and legislation on that front, and we're pleased to see new board members are more focused on being experienced board members and transportation and management experience. On cost issues, according to FTA and DOT data, Metro's rail's costs run 120% to 150% higher than comparable transit systems. That is why I appreciate that Mr. Wiedefeld said at a recent Loudoun County event that he attended with me that he is not asking for more money at this time, but is very much focused on addressing these issues and how we can restructure Metro and how we can address some of these issues on labor negotiations that are coming up and how we can find ways to do better. I'm concerned that there's a clause in the current labor agreement which states, and I quote, "The authority shall not contract out or subcontract any work normally performed by the employees within the bargaining unit defined in this agreement, which would result in a layoff, transfer, or demotion of these employees." Does this prevent Metro from having the kind of flexibility to realize the cost savings of contracting out track work and having the best people at the best price do this work? I know I've talked with the new general manager and FTA about these issues. I've also met with businesses who are doing track work who tell us they can do this at lower costs than we're currently paying, and our current costs seem to run well ahead of Davis-Bacon costs. I also want to see how we are using new technologies that can document the track work being done, technologies that can save money and increase safety and transparency and are already being used at other rail systems around the country. I hope we can explore that more, and since I am a chairman on the Research and Technology Subcommittee in Science, we are going to be looking into having hearings on that, so anywhere we can assist you on that, we want to find the best, most cost-efficient systems that save our taxpayers money. Finally, I want to address the disturbing report we saw in the news last night about a rape that occurred last month on Metro in broad daylight, 10 o'clock in the morning. Clearly, we also have, and I hear this from people all the time, the concerns about basic personal safety. I've had people approach me at my own stations having personal safety issues, and this is something that is obviously unacceptable, but also a concern that this wasn't immediately made known when this report was made, and how are we doing all these things? Because I appreciate we've talked about this new era of transparency as well as the culture of safety that we all need. And finding, better ways to save money. But I do appreciate that you've talked about putting more people on the front lines in the stations. And I think this very troubling incident is one of the many reasons we have to have more people out of the back office and on the front lines protecting our customers and our constituents. Again, I thank the chairman and our witnesses today. I thank the chairman very much for this important hearing and for his hard work on this effort. And I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now turn to Ranking Member Norton for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I have to begin by saying how much I appreciate this hearing. I think the fact that we're having this hearing today points up how important WMATA is, of course, to its immediate region, but also to the federal government itself. We're locked into this together and into WMATA's problems together and unwinding them together. I stress WMATA's uniqueness. No other metro system across the United States has to respond to 3 different jurisdictions. That is a built-in structural problem that neither WMATA nor, for that matter, those of us in the federal government have been able to help WMATA somehow get over. It's there, and it is one of the reasons for its complexities, and those complexities play prominently into the changes that are needed. For example, just this morning, Secretary Fox announced that he was appointing a high-level official from his office to help hasten the work of the 3 jurisdictions in setting up their own safety oversight mechanism. The new chairman, Mr. Wiedenfeld, has taken steps that have been acknowledged to be bold and necessary, to be sure, inconveniencing the public. But here we have we have issues that collide. We want the public to be safe, and we want the public to be able to ride and to get where they're going quickly. And how WMATA solves that during this process when they are overhauling the system is one of the issues we want to face today. The basic challenge WMATA will meet after this single year of essentially rebuilding much of the system is how to keep it that way. And I will want to hear more this morning about that. The word safety culture is thrown around. What does that mean? It is a really scary word because it means that something is embedded in how the WMATA operates that somehow has to be dug out. And the culture notion has not been defined. Congress, of course, passed MAP 21, giving Federal Transit Administration oversight over public transportation in the United States. We reinforced that in the FAST Act. And there are issues that pile onto FTA that it would like to offload. And I think the Safe Track plan of the general manager will help to do that. Some of Metro's funds are being held up because inexcusably, and on top of all of its other issues, it had a financial crisis in how it dealt with applying for its federal grants. That is something that has to be worked out and worked out very quickly. It looks like WMATA has taken the necessary actions, but that the Federal Transit Administration has not responded appropriately. So if WMATA does something right, we expect the federal agency to respond in kind. Mr. Chairman, I'm very anxious to hear the testimony. I very much appreciate that the witnesses have prepared thoughtful testimony today, and I think you see how much today's hearing means to the region that you see 3 members of the region here to testify, and I thank them for coming as well. I yield back, sir.
Thank you very much. I now turn to the chairman of the full committee, Bill Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank our witnesses for being here today. With the panel, we have Mr. Hoyer, Connolly, and Delaney, and then 3 members of the committee, Comstock, Norton, and Edwards. We've got the entire House delegation that represents the area, which we can tell it's an important issue to them, but it's really an important issue to all of us. Millions of people come to Washington, D.C. every year from around our fellow citizens to people from around the world. And this transit system really ought to be the crown jewel of the transit systems around the country. In fact, they get more money per capita than any other system in the country, but they also spend more money than any other system in the country. And we've got to bring those things into alignment. But this needs to be a system that is safe. Safety has to be paramount. And for over 50 years, as mentioned, the Metro system has benefited by federal support. So this is really important to the entire nation that we get this right. In addition to the monies that the federal government gives to the Metro system, also 40% of the Metro's rush hour riders are provided, federal employees are provided a subsidy to ride that system. So again, the safety of the people that we work with every day and depend on to help us operate the government depend on this system being a safe and reliable system. But despite all that federal investment, the safety reliability record has deteriorated. And it's because I believe, and from what I've talked to other folks, it has not switched its responsibility from building a system to operating and maintaining a system. What it takes, I believe, is a cultural change at Metro. And I'm pleased that the new CEO, I think, is doing just that. What the Federal Transit Administration has temporarily taken over that authority, and the Administrator of Flowers is here today to talk about that. That oversight needed to be done because Metro hasn't been able to do it appropriately. Secretary Fox has given 1 year to the WMATA, to Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. to step up to the plate and do what's necessary on this in the federal on the oversight. And last year, Congress, we passed the FAST Act, and in that we strengthened FTA's safety oversight authority and provided the D.C. region with 5 years of increased funding. Again, more federal dollars, the citizens of America contributing to this system. As I said, this should be the crown jewel of the system, and it's not. And we deserve to have that. Again, the new CEO, Paul Wiedefeld, is here today, and his record as a manager of making things run in the proper way, he's got the right resume for it, and I think his strong statements in just his first year really has woken folks up to the need for strong management, for a cultural change at this transit system. So again, I welcome my colleagues here today. I look forward to hearing from them and also from Mr. Wiedefeld and Ms. Flowers on this issue. So thank you very much, and yield back.
I'll now turn to Ranking Member DeFazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's sad that we are here today under these circumstances. There's certainly management issues at WMATA, and I'll get into that in a moment, but let's get to the bottom line here. Congress has neglected to make sufficient investments in infrastructure. Everywhere in the country, cities are struggling between pressure to build out more transit and new options, and that's certainly going on here in what is arguably, potentially, the most congested traffic region in the United States of America, and then maintaining their legacy systems, and Congress hasn't been willing to be an equal partner. $84 billion backlog nationally to bring transit up to a state of good repair. Yeah, the FAST Act's going to give us a little more money. That's good. But with the amount of money there, we're never going to get a state of good repair. Never. It's going to continue. We're just about treading water. And right now, DOT says the average annual level required to eliminate the backlog is $18.5 billion a year. And, well, we're putting up 10. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound too good, does it? It's pretty embarrassing when in what's called the capital of the free world, the greatest country on earth, America exceptionalism, we're killing people on a transit system with a combination of budgetary pressures and management issues. Now, I think we're going to make real progress on the management issues, and we'll hear about that later today. But what about the money? We cannot ignore the need for additional investment. Now, when the so-called American Recovery Act passed, which I voted against because 4% of that $800 and something billion went into infrastructure investment, 4%. Cities like Chicago just pulled projects off the shelf. They had the money committed in 30 days. They could have spent 10, 20 times as much money on projects sitting on the shelf waiting to happen that are critical for the safety and security of their riders and, obviously, the efficiency of the system. So we cannot ignore the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. We aren't putting up the money we need to be a good partner. We only partner 50%, and we don't help with operations. And, you know, we're just walking away from that. So that's why we're here today. So let's not just say this was a management issue or, oh, gee, they spend more money or, gee, they're less efficient. Yeah, those are all issues. But the bottom line is this is not a unique circumstance. What is happening here in Washington, D.C. is getting attention. But that's happening in every major legacy system across the country today, and it's happening in cities that want to give their people new transit options and have to choose between running a bus with 1 billion miles on it that's breaking down every day, maybe the brakes don't work so well, and giving people those new options to get them out of congestion. We shouldn't have to make those choices. The country, the United States of America, can afford to do both. We can afford to partner and help them rebuild and maintain and build out the new options. But it's going to take a new attitude here in Congress. I've offered many ways to help increase transit funding and highway funding. They've all been rejected. We weren't even allowed to vote on one single option, one amendment, when we did the FAST Act. They were not allowed. Many were offered, including bipartisan, that dealt with funding. We pretended. In fact, we took money from the TSA to help pay for that bill, and now people are standing in line at the airports. Wow. We're going to keep shuffling stuff around until nothing works in this country anymore. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the hearing.
Thank you very much. And today we have two panels, and I want to welcome our first panel. We've got the Honorable Steny Hoyer, who's representing the 5th District of Maryland, the Honorable Jerry Connolly, who's representing the 11th District of Virginia, and the Honorable John Delaney, who's representing the 6th District of Maryland. I'd ask unanimous consent that our witnesses' full statements be included in the record. And with that objection, that is so ordered. And with that, we'll start with Mr. Hoyer. Thank you for being here.
Chairman Graves and Ranking Member DeFazio, and I want to associate myself with the remarks of the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Schuster, the chairman of the committee. Clearly, this was the crown jewel. Clearly, nobody would be calling it the crown jewel today, and clearly it must be the crown jewel for all the reasons the chairman mentioned in terms of we used to call this and still call it America's subway because millions and millions of everybody's constituents in this room use this system. I appreciate the opportunity to share my input with the subcommittee regarding the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority and the need for robust investment and high safety standards. The safety and reliability of the Metro is of critical importance, not only to Washington, D.C. and its surrounding communities. It's also critical to the smooth functioning of the federal government and of our national defense and homeland security. Both civilian and military rely on the Metro to get to their offices and to their duty stations. My district is home to 62,000 federal employees and many who serve in military jobs located here in regional installations. Many of them depend on Metro to get to work each day to serve the American people. Metro is also a crucial tool for the millions of Americans and foreign visitors who come to our nation's capital each year. That is the premise which underlines our federal focus. I joined the rest of the National Capital Region delegation last Wednesday for a meeting with Paul Wiedefeld, Metro's new general manager, of whom many of you have spoken, and spoken positively, and I think that appropriately as well, to discuss WMATA's new Safe Track plan, which aims to address maintenance and rehabilitation efforts to improve safety. However, we spoke on a more broad basis than simply the Fast Track or the Safe Track program. The recent incidents on fire and day-long shutdown for diagnostic inspections have brought to light a number of very critical repairs that must be done to ensure that riders are always safe when using the Metro system. In some ways, these problems are the result of past failures to invest adequately in long-term maintenance and upgrades. As the new 7000 series cars are brought into the fleet, we need to make sure that the tracks and tunnels that these new modern cars run on are up to date as well. Metro safety and reliability is a critical concern for residents of Maryland's Fifth District, which is home to communities served by all of Metro's lines. I am disappointed, as I know many are, that Metro needs to implement the Safe Track Plan in the first place, but it is necessary. We shouldn't be in a situation, however, where entire lines need to be shut down for maintenance and where the predictability and reliability of train schedules has been undermined. But I am very impressed with Mr. Wiedefeld's leadership and his determination to take the steps necessary to put Metro back on course to be a system that all in our region and in our country can be proud of. We have a ways to go before we can get to that point, but it is encouraging that WMATA's leadership is fully committed to putting passenger safety first and is acting to improve safety in the near and in the long term. Mr. Chairman, I hope the subcommittee and the full committee will support investments in Metro's safety and service so that Safe Track Plan will be as successful as possible, as quickly as possible. Congress has a responsibility to make sure that the Metro system, which we call America's subway, can well serve those and serve American citizens as well. I want to thank Ranking Member Eleanor Holmes Norton for her untiring advocacy on behalf of Metro and all those who ride it. And Mr. Chairman, I want to assure you and Mr. Schuster and Ms. Norton and Mr. DeFazio that the Washington Metropolitan Delegation is united in its determination to ensure, working with you, that America's subway is a subway system second to none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Hoyer. Next is Congressman Connolly.
Chairman Graves, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member Norton, and DeFazio, thank you so much for having us here today. I'm delighted to join with my colleagues, Mr. Hoyer and Mr. Delaney. I serve as the ranking member of the Government Operations Subcommittee of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which held its own hearings on Metro in the wake of the L'Enfant Plaza tragedy. The challenges facing Metro are significant, and I welcome collaboration between our two committees to ensure robust oversight over Metro's management of federal dollars and adherence to federal safety standards. I've spent the last 22 years working in Metro. First, as a member of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, where as chairman I made appointments to the Metro Board and approved the local operating subsidy. For the past 8 years, I've worked with you and your colleagues here in this committee to secure the $150 million annual federal commitment for Metro safety improvements, which is matched dollar for dollar by Virginia, D.C., and Maryland. No one is more disheartened than I am with the unacceptable and unsustainable state of affairs at Metro. I want to start by commending this committee for your efforts through MAP 21 and then the FAST Act to create a comprehensive framework of safety standards for Metro and all of the nation's transit systems. As the NTSB and the FDA have highlighted again and again, Metro's current local safety agency, the Tri-State Oversight Committee, is nothing more than a paper tiger without the proper resources or tools to provide effective oversight. Our partners in Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. are working together to stand up a new Metro Safety Commission next year that will meet and enforce the new federal standards. Until then, Secretary Fox, acting under new authorities in the FAST Act, has appointed the FTA as the interim safety oversight agency. While I respectfully disagreed with that action, deferring instead to the NTSB's recommendation to use the FRA's more robust safety standards, I share the committee and Secretary's ultimate goal for addressing the shocking lack of safety culture within Metro. To that end, I welcome an opportunity to work with you to explore further expanding the FTA's authorities to better match not only the oversight, but also the enforcement authorities under the FRA to address the NTSB's urgent safety recommendations. In fact, Metro's new general manager has indicated he's voluntarily directing his team to explore what FRA standards they can apply on their own. Regardless of what style of transit commuters are using, they deserve to know they are being protected by effective and enforceable federal standards. What we're witnessing today with Metro is the result of a decades-long march into mediocrity and in dysfunction. Riders are now confronted with near daily service, including today, Mr. Chairman, or safety delays and incidents of arcing or smoke in the tunnels have become all too frequent and, frankly, are scaring riders away. Recent arcing incidents led the general manager to take the unprecedented step of shuttering the entire National Capital subway system for 24 hours in March. And earlier this month, the two stations serving Capitol Hill were closed during the evening rush hour. Mr. Wiedefeld recently released an aggressive proposal to single-track and shut down portions of Metro lines for days at a time in order to condense 3 years' worth of deferred maintenance, 3 years, into 1 year. This will present significant and sustained challenges to riders in the federal government. Federal employees account for 40% of all Metro riders, so we have called on OPM and all federal agencies to push telework and flexible work schedules during this time. Of course, Metro cannot focus only on track and infrastructure repairs. A complete system-wide change in culture is necessary. Safety and personnel actions already taken by Mr. Wiedefeld should serve as a shot across the bow that indifference to safety and customer service will no longer be tolerated. These are not problems that can be fixed overnight. Metro and its partners face a monumental task, and the federal government must be a full funding partner in this effort. And I welcome the opportunity to work with this committee to explore options for expanding our federal commitment to include operating subsidies. The federal government is the only compact member that does not pay any share of operating subsidies. We also must incentivize the National Capital Region to finally create a dedicated source of revenue for funding Metro. These are separate but equally important investments critical to Metro's future success. Metro, Mr. Chairman, has been our single greatest regional achievement and in many ways our single biggest disappointment. Working together, we can restore America's subway to the place of prominence it once held and setting the standard for other transit systems across the nation, giving our riders the world-class system they so sorely deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Next is Representative John Delaney. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I want to thank the chair and the ranking member and all of my colleagues for giving me this opportunity to discuss Metro with you today. It's obviously something that's very important to my constituents, many of which use the system on a daily basis. It's also important, as we know, to everyone who lives in the National Capital Region and to all the visitors of our nation's capital. Clearly, Metro is an organization in crisis with significant deficiencies around safety, around reliability, around customer service, and around financial management. And if you diagnose the problems with Metro, you realize there are several causes. The first, Ranking Member Norton discussed, which is Metro effectively reports to 4 governing jurisdictions: D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and the federal government. This four-headed monster makes it very difficult for Metro to get the kind of funding and oversight that would be optimal for an organization of its scale. Secondly, as Ranking Member DeFazio talked about, by any measure, Metro has been underfunded, and it's lacked a reliable source of funding, which has created greater uncertainty and made the underfunded situation even more pronounced. And finally, it's clearly been mismanaged, perhaps for several decades. When you look back at management decisions, whether they be strategic or tactical, clearly poor decisions were made. I, like you, want to exclude the current general manager from that criticism because I, like you, share the view that he's off to a very good start and we should be very supportive of him. But I think there's another issue that needs to be considered when you talk about what's going on with Metro, and this gets to Chairman Schuster's comments about culture. which is Metro has clearly had a deficient culture as it relates to its priorities. And I think that raises a governance question. In other words, what's happening in terms of the board of directors, in the governance and management of Metro. As someone who spent my whole career in the private sector, chairing 2 publicly traded companies and also being on the board of very high-performing nonprofits, I think governance really matters because a good board sets the correct mission, sets the correct strategic goals. Their most important responsibility is to recruit management, to hold them accountable. If they're not living up to the goals, make management changes, and to secure the funding that the enterprise needs. And the way they secure the funding is by making people believe that they're actually running the place right. And I think this is a significant question with Metro. Right now, Metro has a 16-person board. 4 of those members are appointed by each relevant jurisdiction. And currently, there are no standards for who those members can be. Mr. Schuster, or the chairman, I think you said you can't legislate certain things. One thing you can't legislate is good governance, but you can do things to make sure we have the best people possible sitting around the table making these decisions, instead of maybe just elected officials or instead of just people who were given a board spot because they raised a lot of money for the relevant elected officer. And so what I've tried to do is put forth, and Representative Comstock has been supportive of this with me, put forth a framework where the jurisdictions will be required as part of their appointment process to certify that the members that they're appointing are experts in either finance, in management, in transit, or in safety. I think this will put people with more qualifications and more experience around the board table at Metro, and I think it will encourage maybe longer-term thinking, because my sense is these people will probably have more experience in board governance matters, and they won't think about their own unique interests in the particular jurisdictions they represent, but spend more time thinking about the good of the whole enterprise, which is what a real fiduciary should do. So I think to talk about specific things we can do to change the culture, in addition to getting more funding, in addition to supporting the new management changes, I think there are some important things we can do around governance. And I applaud Secretary Fox, who is actually taking a step in this direction. He recently changed all of the federal appointees to the board and put up 4 people who clearly have expertise in safety, which is something we support. But we would also like to see some people sitting around the table who have finance experience, management experience, and real transit experience. So we get some real experts thinking long-term for the good of the enterprise, creating the right mission, getting the right management team in place, and holding them accountable. And I think over time that can change the culture of Metro. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you very much to all 3 of you. And with that, I'll dismiss the first panel, and we'll bring the second panel up. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, while the second panel is coming up, I would like to ask that the statement of Representative Chris Van Hollen, a member who represents a jurisdiction in this region, be admitted to the record. And I'd like to ask unanimous consent to correct the record and to have a chart that shows federal funding for WMATA as opposed to other agencies. WMATA receives 19% of its budget from federal contributions. 17% is the industry average. On fares, WMATA's fares cover 32.6% of its budget, where the industry average is 23.3%, and I ask that this chart be entered into the record as well.
Without objection, so ordered. Now I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our second panel. We have Mr. Paul Wiedefeld, who's the General Manager of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, Ms. Carolyn Flowers, who's the Acting Administrator, Federal Transit Administration, and the Honorable Tim Levain, Chair of the Transportation Planning Board of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And with that, I would ask unanimous consent that our witnesses' full statements be included in the record. Without objection, that is so ordered. And since the written statements are going to be included in the record, I would request you try to limit your comments to 5 minutes. And with that, Mr. Wiedefeld, we'll start with you.
Good morning, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Norton and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Paul Wiedefeld, General Manager of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, also known as Metro. What I thought I would do is just summarize very quickly what my priorities have been since I joined November 30th for the agency, talk a little bit about what we're up against and what I'm trying to do about it, and then just wrap up with some concluding remarks. In terms of what my priorities are, obviously safety, service reliability, and fiscal management. And so what we're up against, I think it's important just to step back and think about the physical nature of what we're up against before we get into some of the management issues. I think we have to recognize that this is a two-track railroad system, which presents a lot of challenges for maintenance because you cannot maintain the system without impacting the customers, is basically what we have here. And you add on top of that decades of delayed maintenance and underfunding onto that, that's created a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. On top of that is an aging fleet, the cars, the trains themselves. So that's on the rail side. I think it's also important to recognize that Metro is more than just rail. It's also a very, very major bus system. We do almost 600,000 people a day on the bus system alone. And in that case, we have a much better fleet, but we do have some basic infrastructure services as well that needs to be fixed, particularly in garages. In terms of the agency, what I found is what I've heard echoed here is both a lack of safety and service culture in the organization, and it permeates throughout the entire organization, both management and frontline employees. There's been a lack of accountability on the management, on the frontline people, and also a lack of strong management systems put in place. There's been a lack of sustainable and predictable funding source over the decades for the system. We are facing ridership decline. Part of that is self-inflicted by some of the performance levels that we've provided, but also just the changing demographics in the region and the way that we travel. Paratransit, Metro Access is also increasing in demand. It's one of our most expensive services, and we need to think about how we provide that service as well to that part of the community. Crime, as was mentioned, is a concern for all transit agencies. Unfortunately, we've had some terrible and very visible incidents on our system recently, both on our passengers and on some of our employees. And always in the back and in front of my mind is terrorism, and we always have to make sure that we're doing everything on our part to be prepared for anything that may occur there. So what are we doing? In March, I released a customer accountability report where basically there's 60 action items that we've outlined of what we're doing to both increase the overall performance and the customer service portion of what we do. I did release several weeks ago the rail maintenance plan called Safe Track. Basically, the current approach, in my estimation, is not working. We need a much more holistic and both a transparent process for how we go about that upgrading of the tracks. I've been working very closely with our manufacturer of the cars, of the train sets, which is Kawasaki. We now have 134 on property, have 120 in service. That's the 7000 series. We have 748 of those ordered, and as soon as we get those to the point where I'm comfortable that we're delivering what we paid for, we will start to increase that delivery of those cars. The bus fleet is maintained well, so we'll continue in that area. On the Metro Access, we are looking at brokering some outside third-party vendors to provide better service for there. In terms of safety and service culture, that starts with me, basically driving home that is the most important thing that we do. Recently, I've come out with a number of things to reinforce that. Safety trumps all. We now have our track inspectors and people that have the ability to understand the system can shut down the system at any time if they see something that they want to get out and look at, which was not the case in the past. We have a new chief safety officer, which I just brought in earlier this month. We are looking at, the police are doing a Metro, basically constantly Metro stat where we monitor the system every day, literally by minute to apply our resources, and we're adding new resources there. And of course, we're working with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. The good news is that the system over the years, last 40 years, have driven the economic development and really our culture here in this region. And the business community's behind it, elected officials behind it, and the riders behind it. My job is to get it performing better, and then we'll deal with other issues from my perspective into the future, but again, my priorities are on the safety, service reliability, and the fiscal management, and that will continue to be my focus in the near term, and we'll deal with the larger issues as we go forward. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Flowers?
Thank you, Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Norton, Chairman Schuster, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to report on the Federal Transit Administration's work to improve safety and reliability at WMATA. Together, safety and reliability comprise the minimum we should expect from public transportation. And yet, on both counts, WMATA has fallen short. In recent years, the result has been not only delay and disruption, but also injury and fatality. Our goal at FTA is to make sure that WMATA restores safety and reliability for its riders and its employees. We are conducting on-the-ground inspections, leading accident investigations, and directing safety improvements that WMATA must make. To do this, we're exercising the authority Congress provided our agency. Congress first authorized FTA to oversee public safety of transportation systems under MAP 21, and the FAST Act strengthened FTA's ability to set national standards and to enforce them. Over the course of the past 4 years, we have worked with transit industry stakeholders to develop regulations that would be effective, enforceable, and adaptable, the opposite of one size fits all. Where state safety oversight agencies do not exist or where they fail, Congress gave FTA the statutory authority to step in. And that's where we are today in the DC metro area. As Secretary Fox has made clear, FTA's direct oversight of WMATA is temporary. Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia must set up a new state safety oversight agency that is fully functioning, compliant with federal requirements, and capable of providing effective oversight. Nonetheless, since FTA assumed oversight, we have been able to work with WMATA to get results. WMATA has made steady progress in addressing the findings of our initial safety management inspection last year, and they have responded to troubling deficiencies we discovered at the Rail Operations Control Center. Although our investigation of this incident, as a result of the findings from FTA's Safety Blitz in April that looked at 3 key areas: red signal overruns, track integrity, and rail vehicle securement, some track was taken out of service immediately to make repairs, and hundreds of defects have been fixed. In addition to identifying and ordering the correction of safety problems, we've also conducted a review of WMATA's grant applications to ensure that federal funds are being used to address both FTA and NTSB recommendations. But most troubling, however, is the fact that WMATA has failed to create an enduring culture of safety. And although this problem goes much further back, I would like to talk about a recent example. On May 5th, a third rail insulator exploded alongside the platform at the Federal Center Southwest Station. Although our investigation of this incident is ongoing, our preliminary information shows that WMATA's response to this event was slow and inadequate. In this event, operational convenience was clearly prioritized above safety. Not only did WMATA fail to notify FTA in a timely manner, but WMATA's own emergency response team waited hours for track access after only a cursory inspection was made and service was initially resumed. It was only later in the day, when another fire occurred in the same area, that track was taken out of service and the problem was thoroughly addressed. Such errors in judgment and breaches of safety protocol are simply unacceptable. Safety must come first before service. As a result, we issued a safety directive requiring WMATA to take immediate action to prioritize safety before operations to mitigate fire and smoke risks, improve emergency planning and preparedness, and conduct a safety stand-down. We have verified that WMATA has taken steps to address these immediate actions, and to his credit, WMATA General Manager Paul Wiedefeld has been responsive to our safety concerns and has demonstrated a commitment to safety, but the agency still has a difficult task ahead. Beyond the need for critical investments in infrastructure, every one of their employees must make a personal commitment to safety. At FTA, we're working with WMATA and our colleagues from across DOT to help restore Metro Rail's safety and reliability. Thank you.
Ms. Flowers, and next we'll hear from Mr. Levine.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I'm Tim Levine, Chair of the Transportation Planning Board for the National Capital Region at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. I also serve as a member of the Alexandria City Council. The Transportation Planning Board is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the National Capital Region. It is responsible for a continuing, comprehensive, and cooperative transportation planning process in this metropolitan area that includes 22 jurisdictions and over 5 million residents. I would like to thank Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Norton for the opportunity to appear before you today to share my observations on the importance of Metro to this region. I've submitted more detailed testimony, so in my oral remarks I will emphasize three things. First, how critical Metro is to our region's mobility and prosperity. Second, its importance to this region's largest employer, the federal government. And finally, the efforts underway to help Metro improve its safety and service reliability and be the world-class system the nation's capital deserves. Last year, Metro Rail provided 710,000 rail trips on an average workday. 2 million jobs, more than half of all jobs in the region, are located within a half-mile radius of Metro Rail stations and Metro bus stops. 77 of the 91 Metro Rail stations are in 59 regional activity centers, our region's priority locations for growth. 86% of this region's new office construction is occurring within 1/4 mile of Metro Rail stations. Metro helps to tie our multi-state region together. It will also shape future transportation and development patterns, helping our region accommodate an additional 1.5 million people and 1.1 million jobs over the next 30 years. Already, 1 in 5 Metro Rail riders come from zero-car households. Metro also serves a unique role in helping this region accommodate extraordinary special events. For example, Metro provided 1.1 million rail trips on Inauguration Day in 2009. Metro especially helps the federal government do business. As has been noted, the federal workforce represents 43% of Metro's morning peak period commuters, and about 40% of this region's federal workforce use the Metro Rail system. According to GSA, 315 buildings with federal offices or labs, not including DOD, are within 1/2 mile of Metro Rail stations, and it's GSA policy to try to locate future federal office space near Metro. The federal government has recognized Metro's importance to its operations, to its financial contributions to the system's initial construction, the Silver Line, and the State of Good Repair funding under the 2008 PREA Act. It is very important that this federal funding program for Metro be retained, as it is critical to undertaking and completing needed safety and State of Good Repair work. Metro's importance is magnified by the fact that Washington, D.C. is the most important national capital in the world. Our 19 million annual visitors to this region come from around the country and around the world. Their impressions of the D.C. region and our nation as a whole are shaped in part by their experience of the Metro system. This region deserves a world-class transit system. When Metro Rail opened 40 years ago, it quickly gained a reputation as a world-class system, and we need to restore that reputation. We certainly acknowledge that Metro is facing some significant challenges to ensure levels of safety and service reliability that characterize a world-class system. Improving the safety and reliability of the Washington Metro is the #1 priority in this region. This issue has the full attention and commitment at the state and local government levels within this region, and we are pleased that the Federal Transit Administration has been an active partner. This work of improving safety and reliability is being tackled on many fronts. On the safety oversight front, FTA is providing the lead, working with the states. On the management front, we're very pleased that Paul Wiedefeld, in his short tenure, has taken bold actions to address these challenges and begin restoring the trust and pride of Metro riders. There's more work to be done, and our region has come together to work on it. One additional and important resource that is needed to address the safety and reliability challenges, but is beyond Mr. Wiedefeld's power alone to fix, is the need for funding reform. I believe Metro is the only major rail transit system in the country that does not have a dedicated source of funding for its operations and State of Good Repair needs. I believe that lack of dedicated funding has contributed to Metro's maintenance shortfalls. That's why regional leaders are coordinating through the Council of Governments and the Greater Washington Board of Trade to explore how we can work together at the state and local levels to provide long-term, predictable, sustainable, dedicated funding support to meet Metro's needs. And we look forward to continued and hopefully increased financial support from the federal government as well. I am confident that this region and the federal government can continue our partnership and rise up to address Metro's challenges. Working together, we can make Metro a regional and national asset for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into questions. And my first question is for Mr. Wiedefeld. NTSB investigations of different WMATA incidences from 1982 all the way up to last year have unfortunately had very similar findings. It's come down to improper training of WMATA employees and inadequate emergency response by the operations control staff, which was pointed out by Ms. Flowers. Why didn't Metro, and the two questions here, why didn't Metro provide better training and staffing for emergency preparedness? And the second question is, what have you changed at the Rail Operations Control Center to make sure that, that this doesn't repeat itself?
Okay. I can't speak to the history of what training they did. I know what we're doing. One of the things I have done is I did replace the head of the Rail Operations Center in April, so I have a new head there. We have added additional staff there. We have a much more robust training program that came out of some of the incidents in the past. We have staffed up. We have a fire liaison, for instance, now 24/7. When I got here, it was for 16 hours out of the day. We now have them 24 hours because a lot of the incidents, we want that instant communication between emergency personnel and someone in the Rail Operations Center. FTA is monitoring the activities daily, basically at the Rail Operations Centers to make sure that the proper procedures are being followed. We are doing we started spot testing of our controllers to make sure that they are part of all exercises, and in effect, we throw curveballs at them during those exercises. So it's an effort that we have to continue to work on, but we are moving in that direction.
I have a question for Ms. Flowers, too, which the committee's concerned, obviously, about WMATA's safety and the reliability, for sure, but we're also concerned about the need for all the transit agencies all across the country as to their efficiency, and we want them to be as productive as possible with the federal resources that they're receiving. And my question is, what's the FTA doing to ensure that its transit agency recipients are most efficiently using the limited resources that they are receiving, and are you considering contracting out work via, through competitive bid whenever that's appropriate? Ms. Flowers. That's for the FTA.
Okay. Chairman Graves, we have program management oversight as well as grant management oversight of our grantees, and we do contract out some of that work so that we can, on a national basis, be able to monitor our over 800 grantees.
How about the work, so you monitor, or you contract out the work to monitor them?
Yes, and we perform triennial audits and enhanced audits on areas like procurement and financial management.
How about just when it comes to the work, whether that's maintenance work or other things too, putting that out for competitive bid? Do you ever encourage that?
At the grantee level, they make decisions on their procurement, but we do ask them to be effective in the use of our funds. I know that Ms. Comstock mentioned for WMATA that the option of looking at contracting out would be something that she would encourage. That are, agencies that do contract out to try to ensure that they effectively use our funds.
Thank you. I have some more questions, but I'm going to turn to Ms. Norton for her opening questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Flowers, I want to thank all of you at FTA for the new financial discipline you are apparently importing into Metro. Quiet as it's kept, Metro's or WMATA's financial record keeping mirrors or has mirrored the much more widely understood and known issues of safety, particularly financial accountability, a system that was in disarray. Now, that directly affects safety, of course, because most of the money that WMATA is getting is for safety. If you look behind some of the criticism WMATA has received, we are told that $783 million of federal transit funding for WMATA is going unspent. So everyone assumes that WMATA is sitting on money and that WMATA is really ineffective by not spending money it already has. So how could it want more money? But if you look behind these numbers, Ms. Flowers, you find that $300 million of it is obligated for safety projects and for new cars, and the remaining amount is waiting reimbursement through FTA. Now, according to the information we've been given from FTA, in order to bring itself into the compliance it solely needed, and again, I thank you for the discipline that apparently is working, WMATA has complied with all 45 recommendations of FTA, submitted the required 65 corrective action plans, is working with FTA on a testing and validation plan, has closed 5 of the required testing and validation items, and has submitted 11 to FTA for review. The remaining 4 will be done at a later date and will be submitted on time. Ms. Flowers, a recent Inspector General report of FTA criticized FTA for not having consistent policies when it in fact undertakes a very serious matter, which is to withhold federal funds, which in this case means that the 3 jurisdictions get to pay. This report was entitled FTA Monitored Grantees Corrective Actions, but lacks policy and guidance to oversee grantees with restricted access to federal funds. And it found, for example, with respect to WMATA, and here I'm quoting, that WMATA was required to mail hard copies of the invoice packages to a contractor in North Carolina to review, which is more time and resource intensive than other processes. So my question, given the need for every penny WMATA can get, my question to you is, can you specifically identify at what point WMATA will be able to return to normal restrictions and procedures for accessing federal funds that the Congress has appropriated to it, rather than drawing down funds by hand, which can take anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks for the money to get to WMATA for safety and for other matters?
We are on site at WMATA, and we were there yesterday to work on a plan, we call a snapshot plan, to try to expedite the issues that you're talking about. We have also put into our regional office additional employees to ensure that we can address the issues of trying to expedite the drawdowns of WMATA. I understand that, you know, the
Ms. Flowers, if they've complied in this way, what is left to be done so that we can understand what is outstanding?
We're in the final steps of the verification process.
So do you expect in a few months? Do you expect by the end of the year? When do you expect WMATA will be able to access its funds the way, in the normal fashion, rather than by hand?
And this last step, if we see that the documentation is verified, we should be able to, I think, have a targeted lifting of of restricted drawdown in certain areas. There's some of the older stuff that I believe that will still be there, but we can work with them in terms of addressing targeted and focused areas to lift that drawdown.
But you don't have a time frame on when you might be able
We
to accomplish it. The burden is now on you. They've done what you've asked them to do. The reason I'm pressing you on this question is if they've done all they had to do, the burden shifts to FTA then to say, by when do you think WMATA will be accountable enough so that these drawdowns will no longer, these by-hand drawdowns will no longer be necessary?
We're verifying that documentation, and I expect that in the next few weeks, we will have completed this step.
Thank you very much, Ms. Flowers.
Thank you. And I now recognize Chairman Schuster for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say I appreciate the witnesses being here today to testify before this a really important issue. I also want to say I think Congressman Delaney's testimony was spot on. I think that one of the things he said is absolutely paramount in all this, is when if you want to attract the dollars to a corporation, an organization of any kind, you have to first demonstrate that you deploy those dollars efficiently to get things done. And I think that's something that before this committee or this Congress says we're going to give more money to the Metro, we've got to see it demonstrated, and I don't think it's been done over the last several years or a couple of decades, that they have deployed those dollars in the most efficient way. And I think that requires a cultural change at the agency, which I think that the new CEO, Mr. Wiedefeld, has really set the standard for. He said some tough things he needed to do, and he needs to take some tough actions. My question is to managing the employees, and I think if you're going to shake up a culture at an organization, and I spent 20 years of my life in business and had the unfortunate circumstances to have to terminate people, and when I thought about this question, it brought me back to one of the first hearings I had in this room 15 years ago with the EPA Associate Administrator for HR. The previous Congress, before I was here, they passed a law that said the federal employees must follow the guidelines Congress sets in legislation. So my question to the EPA Administrator was, how many people in the last year, out of 17,000 at the time, I believe the number was, how many people did you fire? Took them a couple of whispers back and forth to tell me that they fired one person. Now, terminating and firing people is unpleasant. Like I said, I've spent my life, but there are times when you have to, people that don't do the job, they're doing stuff that they're unsafe, they're negligent, they're illegal, you need to terminate them. And so my question is, Mr. Wiedefeld, do you have the tools necessary, and I know you're coming up to a contract negotiation soon, do you have the tools necessary to, if you have a mechanic, again, I was in an automobile business, and if a mechanic was negligent or illegal or unsafe, try to work with them, but eventually, sometimes, unfortunately, you have to terminate. Do you have those tools available to you that you're able to say to people that aren't doing the job, we got to let you go? Or are they locked in and protected like so many of these government agencies are that you just can't do anything about it? And my example, the EPA is perfect. 17,000 people, they terminated one person. It's just, it doesn't make sense. So could you?
If I could, I'll come at it from two levels. There's the management side, and then there's the frontline employees, which gets, I think, your second issue. In terms of the management, about 3 weeks ago, I sent a letter out to, I have roughly 650 at-will managers, and those aren't necessarily people sitting behind desks, but those are frontline supervisors and superintendents. I sent out a letter to all of them, explaining what my priorities are and, my management style and whatnot. But more importantly, I had them sign a piece of paper that recognized that they were at will, because I'm not sure all of them even understood that. Shortly after that, I held a meeting with all 650 of them. It was the first time in my understanding of the history of the agency where we did that. Where basically, again, I explained what we're doing and that accountability is probably the most important thing that they have to do besides safety and customer service. And then shortly after that, I did terminate a number of managers recently, and I have currently a review of the entire organization in terms of where there's redundancies or just over time positions that just haven't been dealt with. So that's ongoing. So I'll continue to manage that. So that's on the overall management side, where I have a little clearer capabilities. On the frontline side, I do have the ability to let people go. We do have processes for that. It depends on the type of discretion. So for instance, if a station manager is in the right uniform, they get a certain, a certain ding, and you get a few of those, and literally you can terminate someone on that. To basically any major incident, I can terminate immediately. That does not mean they don't have the right to grieve, and we go through a whole process that is set up in the contract, as you mentioned, and that eventually can get to an arbiter, where we will pick an arbiter, the union would pick an arbiter, and then we'll both pick another one, and it'll go through that process, which is the normal process. But no, I do have the ability to do that, and we do that on a regular basis, both on labor and management.
Well, thank you. And once again, I appreciate hearing that from you. Again, we've got to make sure that safety is paramount. The people that ride this, whether they're from the area, whether they're from other parts of the United States or around the world, they deserve to have a safe system. And if there's somebody that's working for the Metro that isn't, then we need to make sure that safety is paramount, and we can't tolerate people that aren't doing their job. So again, I appreciate it, and again, wish you well. And so far, I've been very impressed with your management style so far, and so thank you for being here today.
And I now recognize Ranking Member DeFazio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Administrator Flowers, I realize you're briefly on the job, but in MAP 21, we gave new regulatory authority to FTA over transit safety, and yet some critical aspects of that rule are still lingering somewhere. I don't know whether they're down with the trolls at OMB or where they are. And, what's your expected timeline to get all those done?
Were you asking about FAST Act and MAP 21?
Well, there's things left over from MAP 21
Okay.
where we gave you the new regulatory authority where there are still pending rules
Okay.
to fully implement that.
We just issued the State Safety Oversight Rule on March 16th, and we have several other rules that are in the process right now. We have the Public Safety Program Rule that is going to do the process of review now at DOT, and so expect that to be a final rule by midsummer. The National Public Transportation Safety Plan, this comment period ended on April 5th, and FTA expects to issue that in early fall. We have the Public Safety Transportation Agency Safety Plan, and that is also going to be out in early fall. And we also have the Safety Certification Training Plan, which we expect to come out in midsummer.
Okay, thank you. Just if you can stay on top of those and make certain that they continue through the process. You mentioned the same thing I did in my opening statement, or one of the things, about the backlog and deferred maintenance. Obviously a lot of it lies with the larger legacy systems, and this is a legacy system at this point, although we have much older legacy systems, and as I pointed out, it's really not an adequate amount of funds. So, you've had a chance and begun to look at WMATA, and there's a lot of focus on them, but do you believe that this problem could be more widespread given the deficiency in funding and the accumulated backlog for state of good repair?
Yes, sir. You mentioned there was an $84 billion backlog on a national level. Our estimates that it's about $86 billion, growing at $2.5 billion a year. And as you indicated, WMATA is one of those systems. The legacy systems probably make up 40% of that backlog. And so, although the administration has asked for additional funding for infrastructure, we haven't seen that, that funding has come, and it does create an issue, and it makes it a challenge for all transit agencies to look at their priorities and And you see that challenge here in DC with WMATA, where they have to make a decision about what they can do with their available funding.
Thank you. So when your inspector workforce, you're just standing up essentially your first inspector workforce, and their focus right now is WMATA. When do you expect that you'll have adequate staffing to begin to go out and look at other legacy systems?
We have a focus right now on WMATA, and we have 13 FTEs that are basically focused on that area. We have done technical assistance in other areas where we have found problems, but we have been given additional authority, but not, the funding to basically address that authority.
So you have 13 inspectors total.
13 staff. There's probably only 5 inspectors and 2 investigators.
So we have 5 inspectors and 2 investigators for the Federal Transit Administration to oversee all of the transit agencies in the United States of America. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's interesting. Wonder how long it would take if they spent 10 minutes at each one, how many years that would be, let alone an in-depth look. I hope that Congress will soon allocate additional funds for the new obligations we put on your agency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair.
And thank you. I now recognize Mr. Micah for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I can tell you where to look for some of those dollars. In MAP 21, we passed legislation that was supposed to consolidate or eliminate 50 to 60 programs. When we questioned in oversight how many people had left, it was nobody, so there are plenty of people and plenty of resources. I suggest you might tell the Secretary to find some of them to go into the important oversight responsibility for the transit systems. Ms. Flowers. Ms. Flowers, now you're, with some fanfare, the Secretary's announced what's the name of the position that's going to be created?
A senior advisor?
A senior advisor, and that's just for WMATA, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I don't want this to be window dressing. It's probably a good idea. Probably need some technical people to know what's going on and what we're looking for. But in order to make that effective, Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman, I want you to report to the committee quarterly, okay? And I'll ask the staff for a quarterly report. Maybe we could have one in 3 months, September, end of September, then one at the end of the year. And actually what you find and get it back to us, because I'm going to take some action in the next Congress. I got enough votes and all of that to get back here and make people's life responsible and accountable, but we need accountability out of you all too, okay? It can't be window dressing, it has to be real. And some of the people who say we don't give WMATA enough money, again, my chart we brought out in oversight hearings, again, Mr. Wiedefield, 60% of capital funds come from the federal government. It's one of the highest in the nation. The closest is the chairman's operation SEPTA gets 39% of its money, Philadelphia operations there. That's correct, about that percentage, right, Mr. Wiedefield? Yeah, it's pretty high. In our March 18th hearing, and just prior to that, I checked to see the amount of, we got to have money, Fed's got to, we had $783 million the week before in federal funds sitting at WMATA. Checked it. Do you have, and then the year before we had $485 million in 2015 sitting there not used by WMATA. Now, some of that money does have constraints on it, sir. Is there anything that needs to be changed so that that money can be used to make the improvements for safety that are necessary? Do you have enough flexibility in that? I need to know now because we're doing appropriations for you. Tell me, yes?
Yes.
You do have the flexibility.
We do have the flexibility.
Okay, but the money was there. The money was there. Okay. When you testified on the 18th, 65% of the arcing had been taken care of. Where are we today?
We basically have a program that's
What percentage did you estimate?
I don't have the estimation.
Are we 70? Have we made progress since March 18th?
We have made progress.
What's left? 20%, 10%?
We have arcing, we have insulators every
I
10.
know, I've been out there, I've seen them, I went down to NTSB, I saw the coating, I saw them, some in water. Come on, but what percentage is done? Tell the committee, get that to the committee. We
I will
need
get
to
it to
know, that's where we're having problems right now. And that's not rocket scientists. How much of that is being done in-house, how much is contracted?
With the Safe Track plan, basically, we are using contractors to run
Okay,
24-hour shifts.
so it's
to do it.
contractors in your
And-
hire.
and in-house
And most
as well.
of your repairs, you can probably get done best by contract rather than in-house, right?
It's a combination of both.
Okay, okay. Again, we've got to address the immediate problems, the arcing, any safety. Are there any other major safety issues? Signalization, I heard you're doing some ties and things like that. What would you say are the next safety issues, real quick?
It's a combination of the fasteners, the ties, the power cables, the actual running rail, and the
Okay,
insulators.
and would you also submit to the committee a list of prioritization in which, and then what percentage you think you can do in-house and not outhouse, but outside? Okay, finally, on that hearing, and you had to face me the first hearing, sometimes I have a tough demeanor. I said, you need to fire people. No, I just saw the tape. It's part of my Italian background. I get a little emotional. Sir, you fired people. You fired about 20, I heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to create a new award. You're going to get the first one. This is a certificate of appreciation. I'll probably make these into gold, into silver and bronze. You're going to get a silver because you actually responded since March 18th and took action and fired people. So this is a certificate of special congressional recognition from me to you. If we could get more people in other agencies, TSA, EPA, on and on, to take the action you had, we'd have much better government. Thank you for stepping up to the plate and doing your job responsibly. Okay, finally, if this doesn't work in January when I come back, I will have a very nice, well, maybe I'll give you a little bit more time, sir. I will have a privatization bill to turn this over to private management if this doesn't work. But I think we're in fairly good hands, and I'm rooting for you. Thank you, sir. And staff, would you make sure that the gentleman gets this certificate? This is unprecedented in 24 years in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now recognize Mr. Series for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you for being here. You know, I got to Washington. I'm from New Jersey, and we're one big transportation hub. I got to Washington 10 years ago, and I was all excited because everybody had this reputation for the metro system. I went out and got my card so I could use the metro system here. But ever since I got here, the reputation and the efficiency of this metro system has just gotten worse and worse and worse. And it really is a shame because this is the nation's capital. And at a time in America when people are moving into the cities, at a time when you look at Washington, I'm not going to give you a certificate, at a time when you look around Washington and they're all cranes, people are moving into the city and you get, what, 17 million people coming to the city? This city is choking in its traffic. And yet, we have this system that was a gem. Now we have less ridership than before. So the city, it impacts everything around the city. The economy of the city, the people coming to work in the city. We face similar problems in New Jersey going into New York and so forth. But I think this really has to be turned around, or this city is going to stand still. The only people that will be able to move around here are the people cutting you off with the bicycles. And quite frankly, people deserve better. You know, people deserve a safe system. And as I looked, Mr. Whitterfield, I don't want America to get the wrong impression because of this hearing and everything that's going on here. But I see that you have action items. The FDA says 700, you say 462 or 52, whatever. Can you tell me what's good about the system, what's left in the system that is good, that we can work with and tell America, look, This is a system that we can fix. I want you to come to Washington, D.C. I want you to use the system. I want you to get off the road. We need to get people back in the system so the city can move around a little bit better. What's left that's good?
If I may, we do move 1.3 million passengers a day. So the system does perform very well for the vast majority of people every day. When it has a problem, it has a problem. There's no doubt about it. It gets back to the two-track system that I mentioned earlier. So whenever we have an issue, it impacts everyone very quickly on the line. But that system does perform very well. And when you look at other systems, they all have issues. I went to school in New Jersey. I was worked up there for a number of years. I know some of the issues they've had. They continue to have. They have major challenges in front of them. San Francisco is facing very significant issues. Atlanta's facing issues. We all have these issues. That it's a very large infrastructure investment. But day to day, this system works very well.
And also, the concern is that people in America are moving back into the cities. So if we don't have a system that is safe, I think we're headed for trouble, and I know we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to make sure that there's enough funding there for the infrastructure, enough funding for the safety part of it, and quite frankly, I just want America to know that, Washington, you can still come, and you can still use the system, and we're going to fix it.
You can. I was with a couple in from Colorado the other day, and they didn't know who I was, and they got talking about the Metro, and they had a great experience. So, I mean, it does, I think that's more common than we think.
I want to thank you for being here and talking about the system. Thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you, and I now recognize Mr. Webster for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ride the Metro every day for 5.5 years since I've been in Congress. I would go from Pentagon City to LaFont to Capitol South. And I think there's two things here. I mean, we're talking about more money, maybe saving, hiring people, firing people, doing all that. But all I know is that every day I ride, there's an escalator broken. So I started watching 3 escalators. There's a bunch of them that I ride on, but this is 3. And I would say that over the past few years, that these 3 that I've watched have been rebuilt 4 times. I mean, I'm talking about all new everything, all the treads, all the bearings and all of that. And it just seems to me like there'd be a more efficient way to do that. If we save money, then we certainly can do more maintenance in the right place. I would tell you, you ought to look, and I don't know if there's any reports or anything about that, but all I can tell you is I know because I've seen it. On the other hand, there's one escalator that is privately done, and in the 5.5 years I've been riding that one on that same system where you get dropped off, and then this one is done by the people that own the building. It's been broken once in 5.5 years. So I think there's probably, I don't know what you do as far as efficiency and as far as rechecking the people that do your maintenance and so forth, but if the other maintenance, I've never been in a wreck or anything like that, so I don't know anything about the cars. I see them, they may be, you may have extra ones, you may change them out all the time. I don't know that. What I do know is the escalators are fixed. They're there, and you got to have them repaired time and time again. And it just seems to me like, and I don't know if it's done by an independent contractor or by your employees, whether it's maybe it's the vendor that provides the actual treads and so forth on the escalator. But I will tell you, I believe there's lots of savings to be found there, either by getting a different vendor or different employees or a different person that actually performs the work if it's an independent contractor. So that's my 2 cents. That's only from my experience on it. I don't live here. I have one rail system in my district. It's owned by Disney World, and I've never seen it broken in the 30-some years they've been there. And we have a lot of people that ride that too. We have 66 million people that come to my district every year, and they go one place, Walt Disney World, and also SeaWorld and Universal Studios. but the one rail system there seems to be much more maintained. So I would suggest maybe just talking to those who own or operate rail systems. Maybe there's some savings there too. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, and I now recognize Ms. Frankel for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses. I know sometimes you're probably sitting there thinking that Congress, we do a better job at criticizing than fixing. Thank you for your patience and your courtesy. Also, I live near a subway, and I rode the Metro. I used to love to ride the Metro, but there obviously these stories in the newspapers and on TV have been scary to me. So my first question is, could you quantify, has there been a decline in the ridership, and does that affect your budget? And the other question I have is also, there have been these very high publicized criminal incidences. There was a young man that was stabbed multiple times. There was a woman that was recently sexually assaulted. And I don't mean to insinuate that that was the fault of Metro. But my question would be, is there anything that you can do to make it safer, or are you doing to make it safer for the riders?
Excuse me, on the ridership levels first, yes, we have had a drop over the last 5 years. It's a combination, I think, again, of some of the quality of the service we provided, but it is also just the change in demographics. Telecommuting, particularly in this region, is very strong. The growth of Uber, rideshare, all kinds of things, I think, have impacted that. And we're not unique in that regard either. There's other properties around the country that are experiencing some of that as well, major properties. In terms of the criminal activity, it is an extremely safe system from that perspective numerically. It's very safe. It's 5 incidents per million, Part 1 incidents per million riders, which is extremely safe. That means nothing to, obviously, the person that's the victim, and does not mean much for the perception. We have applied a number of things in terms of policing. We basically put more police out there. We're moving people out from behind desks. We're moving people that used to, for instance, use our revenue train, which collect the dollars. We've contracted it out, so we have armed officers out there, sworn officers out there. We have a major recruitment underway to have our sworn to beef up that area. In fact, today we're meeting with Washington Council of Governments, in effect, to have an agreement with all the jurisdictions where we could bring in moonlighting officers, sworn officers again, to beef up the presence on the system. The reality is, if you do something in our system, we get you literally within hours, if not days. Every one of these incidents, for what it's worth, we are getting these people. These things happen in a matter of seconds. And with a vast open system, it's extremely difficult, obviously, to be everywhere at every time. But it's clearly a concern for our customers and for us, and we'll continue to work it. We're working with, for instance, the local school system on issues. We follow social media to monitor what's going on out in the community. And again, we apply the resources accordingly, with the limited resources that we do have.
One more question. I see you got an award from one of my colleagues for firing. I think a better award would be for training. What are you doing about training so you don't have to fire?
Yeah, let me just, if I could just, I get no pleasure. It is that is the last thing I want to do is let someone go. I understand the impact it has on their personal life. So that is the key, is to train, to bring people along. And again, it's not just management, but it's frontline employees. So that is part of, in my estimation, is part of the change of the culture. That's how you get to the safety culture and the customer service culture. It's not necessarily through discipline. You have to have that tool. But that is the last tool I want to use personally. I think it's the last tool any manager wants to use. But on the other hand, you have to use it when you need to do it.
What are you doing to up the training?
Basically, there's a number of things. On the frontline people, we're focusing on the safety training right now is one of our biggest things. Just basic, even how we even ID our people, for instance. We don't.
Are you holding classes?
Yes,
what are
we
you
do.
doing?
Yes, a series of classes. We have outside vendors coming in, creating programs for us. We literally have to do it on an annual basis. We haven't even been doing that. We've been letting it slip, making sure that we're doing that. So it's recruiting people that come in that way. It's a combination of all those.
And this is required, employees are required to go through the training.
Yes, yes. Every new employee spends 4 days in training the minute they walk in the door, just so they understand who we are and what we do.
What about continuing?
And exactly, that's what they have to do. Some of them, literally, to have their identification badge, they have to have the training.
Thank you very much. Yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Meadows for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me come back, Mr. Wiedefield, to you. Obviously, we've had our dealings before, and I guess my concern is today we've heard a lot of talk about funding, and the focus is all about funding, and yet I understand that perhaps this is not a funding issue as much as it is a management issue and truly a maintenance issue. Is that correct?
I think there's an issue with the funding in terms of a dedicated and sustainable funding source. So I think that's not necessarily means more dollars. It just means that we would not go through an annual budgeting process where we're competing against.
So are you aware that at no time that we can find that the board has come to this committee or the oversight committee to suggest that maintenance was not getting done because they didn't have funding? We can't find that.
I'm not aware of that.
Well, so if you're not aware of that, and this committee is not aware of it, and the oversight committee is not aware of it, how can we be focusing all our attention on funding when your board has never let us know that they're not doing repairs because of funding?
I just don't know the history of what the board's done with it.
All right. Are you aware that there's an average of 4 times a week a fire actually occurs on the metro system, and that makes it, there's a greater probability of somebody seeing a fire on the metro in Washington, D.C. over the last 5 months than there was in the Great Smoky National Park that I represent. Do you find that alarming?
I do. I think it's, again, that's why the Safe Track plan and all the implications of that is why I put it out there.
All right. So if we're looking at this board, and I understand from a board member that you are, the buck stops with you, they're not going to micromanage, you're going to have complete authority to make this system safe, reliable, and a service standard that we can all applaud. Is that correct?
It is.
All right. If that does not happen, will you, within 7 days, let this committee and the oversight committee know that you are being thwarted by the board?
Again, I think you asked me
Okay,
this question.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm making a request that if there is an interference by the board on any of the service-related activity, will you report back to this committee and to the oversight committee?
Sir, if I may, again, you know, I took this job to tackle these issues. If I am thwarted in any way, then that is not the job for me.
All right. So let me go back to the board, because a lot has been said about who the board should be, what the makeup should be. And I ran into a gentleman in the hall here a week or two ago and said, really, the board should have someone who travels the metro each and every day as a citizen advocate, so to speak, that is on the board. Do you agree with that?
I know a number of the board members use the system every day.
Okay.
I don't know all of them.
But someone who speaks just, that doesn't have any political ties, that actually speaks for the populace, do you think that would not be a bad idea?
I have that through riders unions. I have that through a number of resources.
Okay. All right. So the other thing I would say is, what if we took every one of the board members and required them for 1 week a year to experience what all the commuters get to experience each and every day? Do you think it would change their opinion on some of this?
I get text and emails from board members constantly.
But I mean,
of their
every board
experiences.
member, because there's some who obviously don't use the metro and perhaps don't have the same appreciation.
I think they all do use it. I just don't know, sir.
All right. So making that a requirement is not something that you would support?
I think they use it today.
Okay. All right, so let me finish with the funding question. We're going to rely on you to make good management decisions and realign this. From a funding standpoint, do you think it is wise to continue to add additional capital improvements and extend the metro when we don't have a good maintenance operating budget plan in place? Because that's really what we did. We invested billions of dollars in a metro, like buying a new car, and then we didn't change the oil for 30 years. And so in doing that, do you think it is more prudent to have the maintenance of the existing system as the top priority versus the capital expenditure for expansion until we get that in place?
I think we have the same experience that I think whatever the number is, $86 billion worth of unmet maintenance needs around the country, yet we still need to increase, the system for economic reasons, for safety reasons, all kinds of other reasons. So I think that, there's a time for that. My focus is on the maintenance, and my focus going forward is after we do this Safe Track plan, we cannot back away from the ongoing maintenance, or we will be right back where we started.
All right, I will yield back, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Lipinski for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to, before I get into the meat of things, there's a couple things I want to make sure I get out there. And first, I want to say that I started a few years ago in here the first Congressional Transit Caucus because of how important it is that we support public transit across the country, not just my hometown of Chicago, but I'm also a Metro rider when I'm out here. So first thing I wanted to mention is I'm going to have a question for the record about WMATA's recent cancellation of the new electronic payment program, which I know is designed to make the customer experience better and to reportedly would have saved WMATA up to $60 million a year. So I know there's much invested in this, and we certainly see challenges with the current fare collection system. So I'm going to be asking a question for the record on that and what has happened with that. But I want to move on. I just want to ask a quick question to Ms. Flowers. A recent assault on DC Metro bus driver became deadly when the bus was hijacked and horrifically killed a pedestrian. And driver assaults are a national issue. The Fast Track asked FTA to issue notice of proposed rulemaking on driver assaults, which is a growing issue. When will FTA issue this rulemaking?
Well, the first thing that we've done is that our Transit Advisory Committee on Safety has done a study on operator assault and given us some best practices and recommendations on preventing and mitigating transit worker assaults. So that's going to be the basis for us putting together our proposed rulemaking. And so we're currently gathering information and input from the transit community as well as unions to inform this rulemaking. So we're in the process right now of working on that.
Thank you. I want to probably come back to you later on this after the hearing, but thank you for that. I just want to say this morning I'm a Red Line rider. Wake up, here there are 2 places they're single tracking a report of a arcing incident. I said, I'm getting on my bike to ride the 17 miles down to Capitol Hill because I don't know when I'm going to get in. I think Metro, in so many ways, is unfortunately an embarrassment in our nation's capital, but it needs to work. So, I'm not here to just tear things down. We need this system to work. I think the region needs to come up with a dedicated funding source for Metro. We can't do anything here in Congress about, but I think that's something the region needs to do. But we need definitely, as a lot of talk about changing of the, we need to change the way people act within the system, the whole culture, and that's difficult to do. I thank you, Mr. Wiedefeld, for what you have many things that you've done so far. I want to ask, I know the March 16 shutdown caused significant inconvenience to many of the region's commuters, but 2 months after the shutdown, the FTA released a series of safety directives to Metro. Among them were things that appear to be routine maintenance, including removing debris, replacing insulators, and third rail cover boards. So I'm concerned about Metro's efficiency in conducting inspection and repair, especially given the Safe Track plan is about to begin. And I want to be assured that if Metro is going to cause serious disruption in people's daily lives, that you'll be using the time to accomplish all the required maintenance. So first, were FTA's findings in May a result of the March 16 shutdown, or were those findings a result of previous inspections, or what was those, the May FTA findings, where did those come from?
I think they reflected, again, the lack of ongoing maintenance and the ability to get out there and do that. And that's why the Safe Track has the impacts it has, because physically to get out there and do the level of work we need to do, because it's not just one thing.
But did you know, were the May findings a result of, are those things that were found on the March 16 shutdown, or?
No, in the March 16th shutdown, we were looking at the power cables issue, because that was.
So you just focused on that one thing?
We were focused on that because of the LaFont accident.
Okay, so when Metro has completed the Safe Track program, will it be in compliance with all federal safety orders and recommendations?
It will be, yes, that's the plan. And the plan, again, is it's not only just to meet it, but then we have to go beyond it and we have to maintain it.
Okay.
It's one thing to get out there and do all this repairs, but if we don't keep doing that, then we're going to be right back to where we were.
In one thing, very, very quickly, I noticed, I live, not only do I take the red line, I hear the red line going by, unfortunately, all the time, where I, sleep when I'm out here. I heard for months a click-clack of every time a wheel set went over a track for months, and then one morning I wake up and they say there's a broken rail just south of the Grosvenor Metro stop, and I said, I could have told you a long time ago that there's a problem there. And it seems like there's somehow something wrong in the culture. Someone should have been able, an operator should have said, hey, there's something wrong here. And that's, I think, all part of changing the culture here, where everyone is part of trying to make this system run well. And that's something that really needs to change. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We're going to be watching it, but we need to make the system work. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Wanted to highlight an issue that I raised in my opening statement, and that I think I've talked about with Mr. Wiedefeld and Ms. Flowers, that our average costs at Metro are higher. According to the FDA Federal Transit Administration documents that I'm reading, our operating expenses per vehicle revenue mile are 124% of the average, up to our operating expense per passenger mile is 151%, and I think that works out to some of the hourly rates of a track walker of $36 an hour, and with benefits $53 an hour, track repairs $32 an hour with benefits up to $48, and that's compared to Davis-Bacon prevailing wage rates of that would be $23 an hour, and with benefits more like $30 an hour. And that leads to my question that I'd asked in opening is, can we use outside contractors, and can we change whatever we need to in the labor contract in order to expedite this, so we can use outside contractors that are able to provide the same service at a lower cost, basically at the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage rates, and get this expedited with that kind of expertise?
We can, under the current contract, we can't replace workers with contractors, but if we have, and that's what we're doing, in effect, we're bringing in workers above and beyond what our current workforce can do. So that's how I can bring an outside contractor.
But are they getting paid this contract rate that you have with the existing employees, or can they be brought in and get these $30 rates, where we have contractors who will come in and work for lower rates during this expedited time when we're trying to save money, get things back online, we can deal with the contract and things later, but I just want to make sure we can take advantage of this opportunity to save some money here and have workers who can help with that.
I can provide that to the committee.
Okay,
the details
because
of
we've
that.
met with people who would like to help there, so I'd like to see if we can expedite that. And then on the technology front, as I mentioned in my opening statement, and excuse my language here, but have you seen the Metro blog called Unsuck Metro? I hope you're all familiar with that. I think certainly I could tell you a lot of the staff on the Hill are familiar with it and the federal employees. How are we using technology? And actually that's a good, I looked at that this morning and throughout the hearing. One of their major questions they do want to know is about this rape incident, about the crime. So I would like you to address that, but also wanted to address in terms of technology, why don't we, in the interest of transparency and to enable all of your riders to assist in some of the things that Mr. Lipinski talked about, how can we plug into the system and go in and see, here's where all the recent crimes have been. By station, we should be able to we have the technology at very low cost. If this blog can do this, certainly we can do it at little to no cost. I've spoken with technology companies that are doing this in other metro areas around the country, and this technology enables us to do safety pictures, while you're out there fixing it. You get a picture, you have the timestamp of the person working on it. So there's a lot of accountability. That can go up online immediately for all of us to see. And all of those hundreds of unmet safety issues right now, can we have them all online today? We can see where they are at each station, and as they disappear, we can see them disappear. We can see new ones go online. And in your interest of transparency, can you commit to providing that as well as using the technology?
Yes, I do commit to that, and with the Safe Track program, that's what we're creating, is the ability, in effect, to monitor what we're doing. That's what the CARE report is about, the Customer Accountability Report, is literally we put out, every month we update things that we're doing so people can see where we are on that. But I'll also be very frank, I think I want to work with outside vendors and just the community in general that have that knowledge in the technology world. It's awfully hard for us to create that, just within the structure we have. It's also something that's not core to our mission. I think we have a lot of smart people in this region we could tap in, and you've seen it evolve. And so rather than, we have to think of ways to team with them, not ways to push them away. So that is something that I've made very clear, that I want to bring those people to the table because they have the knowledge, they have the skill base, and again, just open it up. We have nothing to hide. It is what it is, and now we have to start to attack it.
And I think we talked about this with Ms. Flowers last week when your staff came in too, and if we just had that ability for the public when they see something like Mr. Lipinski said, that goes into the system and it can be time-stamped. We have the technology. If somebody had seen that fire that day, taken the picture and sent it in, are your folks tracking that and saying, okay, this is a picture that just came in from this station, it's time-stamped, it lines up. You don't have to send anyone out to the station, to verify that. You've got a picture that is time-stamped and does that, and I can give that to you as well as somebody who's paid $50 an hour to do it. So these time lapses that we have shouldn't be occurring given we have the technology that can, really, when you look at the fatality that occurred, most of what we know about it occurred from people using their cell phones and giving us that information. And let's make sure we're using that to maximum effect and that your staff isn't creating new methods, but is taking advantage of all that.
No, I totally agree, but I want our staff to basically do things before it gets to the point where they have to take a photo of it. An example I gave to the managers when I saw them is at New Carrollton Station in front of a cabinet that basically is an emergency cabinet for putting equipment onto the tracks to basically rescue people and to do things like that. We had parked, or our vendor had parked, a very large piece of construction equipment in front of it. That should not happen. I shouldn't need to be taking photos of that. That should just be something that our employees see, and they say, that's wrong, fix it. So that's the cultural change that we have to get to.
Okay, and could we go back to that rape incident in the report? Why wasn't that made public at the time? Why didn't we know about that?
Because it was solved in hours. We knew who the person was, and literally they had that person, so they were pursuing that person, and literally in hours we had apprehended that person. We do report out all crime statistics on a regular basis, quarterly at a minimum, to the board, where we go through every event that we have. So there's.
But can that
we're not
also be
hiding.
reported to, apparently, have those crime statistics on the website by station or by whatever way is accurate, so that we all know that immediately? I appreciate that it was solved quickly. I guess the criminal used a smart card, is that?
Yeah, it's a
and we were able to-
combination of that and in our TV cameras and different things that we.
So while that was resolved quickly, the public at large didn't know about it, and that, in reading the blog, that's something that everyone's concerned about. So can we take those crime statistics, whether it's, hey, there's somebody who's at Capitol South snatching purses. I understand cell phones being stolen are one of the most common things that happen at the stations, because people are there looking at them, they aren't paying attention. Someone snatches it, runs out the door. Can we have those kind of incidents per station reported so that people know the stations they're going to, they can look, they can see what is going on there in real time, and just having all that statistics. And I think what will also help you in that way, if we have that available, is all of our transportation resources, universities that are looking at data. You will give them a vast amount of research data to help you do some work that you don't have to pay for.
No, we will provide that type of data. I think we have to put in context of, we're just part of the community, and a lot of these things happen around us. Sometimes they happen on our property, and sometimes they don't. So I think, if someone's stealing someone's camera, happens just as likely outside of our station as inside of our stations.
But I just think the information is power for the customers. As you've heard, people are becoming more afraid to use it. I wanted to mention, in addition to our costs being higher, 120 to 150%, are you confident you can bring those costs down in the upcoming negotiations?
We will. We've started negotiations. Obviously, we've made a commitment to do that at the table. We are focusing on both wage, pension, health benefits, and work rules. Okay. So we will attack each one of those, but it is a negotiation, and it does go to binding arbitration.
Okay, and I wanted to point out and emphasize that given our costs are 120 to 150% higher, it's incredibly distressing that our performance, I believe, is at 75% on-time performance now, when your average transit system is up in the high 90s. So that's the disconnect that people see and the concern. So thank you, and I know I've run over my time here. I now recognize Ms. Esty for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank you all for joining us here today. And as somebody who is a high school student, was in those metros when they were being built with my father, who was part of the construction teams building them, I have particular interest in the legacy around how we maintain these systems. So a couple of different questions. First, Mr. Wiedefeld, on the safety culture, who are you looking at? What organizations or what institutions do you think we should be looking at to inculcate the kind of safety culture that needs to be instinct?
Right.
It needs to be instinct, and I believe it does have to be from the top. There's no substitute for that.
Okay. I spent 10 years running BWI Airport, and I think that's a great example, and the aviation community in general is. It is just part of who you are when you think about safety in an airport, and I'm trying to instill that, that same sort of philosophy, and just sort of, it is who you are when you work at the transit agency.
I would agree. I think checklist manifesto, the sort of idea that that is baked into absolutely every decision that you make, and to empower workers to see that as their responsibility to get there first. Following up on what Subcommittee Chair Comstock said, I think you look at something like Click It, Fix It that is being done in cities to empower people who are users of the system, not as adversaries, but as advocates for making sure that the highest priority situations are dealt with first. So again, having recently been in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are very eager to try to help democracy work well. And I think we need to find some way to tap into their energy and their intellectual capital in a way that helps us launch into the 21st century and not be tied up so much in, frankly, trying to update our computer systems that are 3 generations old. So I think a number of us would be eager to try to help make those connections. For Administrator Flowers, we have an ongoing issue, and it is not unique to transit, about the excitement about developing a big new system, whether it's a bridge or a road or an airport. We never put enough money aside for maintenance. For these heavily used transit systems, it's absolutely essential, given what has happened here. Do you have suggestions for how we insist that it is actually being spent as we go, that it cannot be postponed? Because we know that is the political imperative, is you'd rather go on and do something new, extend the system, whatever it is. Maintenance is never exciting, it's not sexy, but it is a disaster when the worst happens. Do you have suggestions for us as to how to restructure the deployment of that money or the incentives around it to ensure that it gets spent as it needs to be as we go?
One of the criteria that we look at with the financial plans for new capital projects is to ensure that in the financial forecast that maintenance is included in that. And I think that is going to be critical. When you're constructing a new system, you have to ensure that there's a way to sustain that system over a long period of time. Those assets are built for 50 to 100 years. And so it is just critical that you look at the way to sustain the system in the future. So that is part of the plans that we look at when we are now awarding projects. And addressing the state of good repair as part of our program is also going to be really critical, and having funding for the state of good repair to ensure that these systems have enough funds for maintenance and that the maintenance is not deferred.
Well, I think we need to be working together to ensure that we see that progress through that list, the ticker list. This is the priority projects, and this is how far the money gets us. And then you have to come back to us or to the board and say, we are not far enough, it's dangerous, and this is what we've done, and this is what we still need to do, because you have to get to the appropriators to make sure the money's there. But we need to see the progress, and we need the judgment about on the ground what is now the critical piece that needs to be addressed, and that you're spending it that way. And finally, Mr. Wiedefeld, can you talk a little bit about the reliability and performance measures that you're going to use, what riders of the Metro should expect, or already has been discussed by some of my colleagues, already not where we would want to be, and obviously taking things offline is going to exacerbate that. What figures are you using, and how are those going to be communicated to the riding public and to us?
Sure. We do a vital signs report that basically we produce, that you can go online and monitor what we do. One of the things that we have changed just recently, we used to put on our on-time performance on rail cars based on how we managed it. We moved to a mechanism where basically as you tap in to the time you tap out is the real, from a customer's perspective, that's the real delay. So for instance, that's what we're starting to put out there as here's what's really happening in the system, and not some sort of computer generated number.
Thank you. I see my time's expired. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll recognize Ms. Norton for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairwoman for taking me out of order. Mr. Wiedefeld, we all recognize that there are no new ready sources of revenue for WMATA. The usual mythical sources, of course, are mentioned from time to time. Some from this side of the room, such as outsourcing, or the federal government has never been mentioned by any of you, but of course it's been alleged that that is what is really called for here. I do note that in the last FAST Act, that we just done, there was a 25% increase for older systems. And that was something that, as the ranking member, I fought very hard for, because there really is a difference between these systems and the newer ones. Yet, what cannot be ignored is that Metro's had a 5% loss over the last 5 years. You're probably going to have more with SafeTrack. But I noted in something you said a few months ago that WMATA was trying to help itself. It was looking for something that business often does, incentives to reattract riders. I don't know, and you can tell me things like if you went into a station and it was crowded and you just had to leave, you could re-enter at some later point, some kind of new pass. Could you outline what kind, if you are still considering such incentives, particularly after you're going to lose some of your riders anyway, can you afford to put some of these incentives in place? And if so, what kind of incentives are you looking at now to help riders be reattracted to Metro?
Okay. Yeah, a few things we've done. One is the ability, in effect, to tap in, tap out, what we call. So if you get into a station, there's something going on, we would charge you to get back out, even though you didn't use the system. So we changed that. So basically, you get 15 minutes to make up your mind, and if something doesn't play out the way you want to play it, you get back out. You don't have to pay. I think that's just a good customer service, product that we should have. We've worked with the university system, for instance, for a universal university pass. We're in effect, we're working with American University, where all their students will have unlimited use of the system for a flat fee that they charge at the beginning of the year as part of their tuition or their fees, I guess. And the rationale for that is basically that's a lot of non-peak usage. It also introduces other people that we want to educate about the system and use the system, another way to attract people like that. Again, we're trying to do things from a customer and IT side to give real-time information, again, as I just mentioned, so people can make educated decisions. So it's continuing to do things like that. I've got to balance that clearly on the potential impact on revenue of that. But on the other hand, we have to make sure that we're reflecting the times of today and not doing the same stuff we did in 1980, 1990.
So notwithstanding Fast Track, you're still going to put those incentives out there. In fact, perhaps because of Fast Track, you need those incentives out there.
Yes, we will.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm now going to recognize myself for another 5 minutes also. Going back to some of the labor costs, can you tell us what it does, like for say a track inspector position? What do those pay?
I don't know the track inspectors. I know the operations
walker.
side better, but I can get you the track information. I just don't have those.
Okay, and I know I know you're new, so I'm not blaming you on some. We've had some of the questions in, and I haven't been able to get some answers on just some of the labor costs and what we're paying people per hour. And again, as we're talking about how we right-size this and how we get the expenses under control, I think it's very helpful to have that transparent and to know what these jobs pay in comparison to.
If I could, I can tell you, like on the operation side, because most of our employees are bus operators, train operators, station managers. So the bus operators start just above $19 an hour. The highest rate gets about to be $31 an hour. That's about 5th in the country in terms of when we compare to other properties on the heavy rail side, and we're basically about 5th, 6th on the bus side compared to major properties.
Okay, and then on the 20 people who were fired, I assume there's some longevity there, so those people are still getting their pensions and getting paid, in future, so we have legacy costs there. And that was one of the questions I had asked too, and I think in terms of, because currently the policy right now is the overtime goes towards their pension, so when you have overtime in the system, so we were trying to find out what level of overtime there was throughout the system. Now I understand while we're doing this accelerated repair that there's inevitably going to be some overtime, but that again would be why I would hope we would look to contracting out, where we'll not only be able to avoid that overtime, you'll be able to avoid the long-term legacy costs that overtime currently would present, as well as being able to contract out at a lower cost. So again, I'd reemphasize.
Yeah, and I'll get you the facts on that.
Okay, and then in going forward in the labor negotiations, what are we, the public and Congress, able to see? I know we had talked about this a little bit in terms of what are we able to see in the transparency in the labor process and what's being negotiated and what, because you're going to have to negotiate this, but really, since we're partners in this and the whole region is, I think it's important that we, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Congress, all know what the negotiations are and the terms and how we compare to other systems throughout the country. What kind of information can we get on that?
Well, we will be presenting that to the board. I mean, that is their role. So we'll be presenting all that information to the board. Again, we have an agreement on both sides to do these negotiations. They're negotiations, so we don't want to do them in public. So that is what we're doing. But we will take it to the board, and that's a very public process.
Okay, but when it's presented to the board, can it also be presented to us in Congress?
Yes.
Okay, and maybe also to the public, because again, kind of feeding off of that ability for the public, we have a lot of expertise out there. There's a lot of people who'd like to compete in this space, probably to give us a better product, more technologically accurate. And when they're able to see in a transparent way how we operate, I think that will give us, more people coming forward to talk to us, to talk to you. So if we can open up that process and just have an open platform in whatever way we need to get that information out, whether it be, the maintenance, what we're paying, various contracts, paratransit you've highlighted for us, that looking at other ways we can save, as well as the technology.
Right. But again, we have to do that within the federal, the context of negotiations that is, in federal law.
Okay, and Ms. Flowers, do you have anything to add on that front on how we might be able to help you do your job in terms of how you're trying to approach this?
Well, we thank you for the support that you have provided to us through the FAST Act as well as MAP 21 and expanding our authority. We have the challenges of the additional authority and, like everyone else here at the table, funding for that authority is one of the challenges that we have. So we just look for the support through the appropriation process to provide us with the necessary resources that are needed to do our job.
Okay. And finally, I guess I'm running out of time here, but I guess there's no one else I'm imposing upon except the witnesses. But I wanted to ask about the Rock, which I've been up to visit, and thank you and your staff for bringing us there and continuing to update us on what is going on there. I understand right now, if this is correct, that we have 46 positions are allocated for the controllers there, but there are currently 19 vacancies. Is that still accurate?
No, I think the vacancy is down to 3. There's people in training, though.
Okay.
So they're not certified yet to be on the floor.
Okay, so we're getting online
yes,
too.
Yes.
And I appreciate that because, as you know, both in formal reports as well as things as informal as, I know I've cited it before and cited it to you all, the Washingtonian magazine that kind of gave the customer account, but also the worker account of that was seen as sort of a source of a lot of the problems. What kind of actions are you able to take so far, and do you see taking forward to correct a lot of the problems that were there?
As I mentioned in April, I have a new head of the Rock who has both experience there and also in other parts of the agency, so it brings some different skill bases to that. It's a focus of now my chief safety officer to go in there and think of other ways that they should be, particularly on drilling and things of that. FTA has been very supportive of that as well. So that's, again, it's all the above. It's not just one thing, but clearly management is a big part of it.
Okay, well, I appreciate all of your time and your attention to this important matter. I think you've heard from all of our colleagues in the regional area, but as well as the chairman here and members who've been involved in these issues for years. There is a large measure of goodwill and appreciation for what you're doing and the difficulty of the task ahead. And I think it's very important that as long as we are able to stay united on this and work with you on fixing this, we know we will have problems and disagreements, down the road, but I think as much as we can keep this together and where you can come to us and tell us tools that you do not have, as you run into blockages where you can say, well, we could do this faster and I can keep my year deadline or even shorten the year deadline if I could, have this authority from Congress, or if we could change this law, if there are legislative fixes that we need, or things that you aren't able to do under current rules, please let FDA know, let us know. If you aren't getting the kind of support from wherever, we need to know. And I'd also invite the listening public too, and those who go on blogs of whatever name, that you let us know your experience. Take those pictures. I can tell you when I was on the Transportation Committee in the State House, people would send me their pictures of road problems, things. I would be able to send them right to VDOT. And when I had a picture, when I had a location, it always got handled much faster. And we have people on these trains every day who are dealing with things. Take those pictures, send it up, put them on blogs, give that attention, because then, whether it's the supervisors or anyone else, there's nowhere to run to. It's there. We know it. We're working through these problems in a systematic way. So I would ask all of us to be partners in helping you do your job, and thank you. So I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. And without objection, it is so ordered. And if no other members, I guess, have anything to add, this subcommittee stands adjourned.